Now shifting our focus away from the news, you cannot carry out fundamental change without a certain amount of madness. Now Africa is said to be flourishing with growth and investment, while on the other hand we continue to see conflicts, disease and poverty. Now Wrong Things About Africa is a book by Ndangwa Noyoo and argues that Africa is in a mess due to African people's misguided actions at all levels of the economy. The book argues that even though Africa's problems emanate from colonialism, at some point we need to take responsibility for our recent actions. Now joining us in studio is the author of Wrong Things About Africa, Ndangwa Noyoo. Very good morning to you and thank you for being here.
Morning. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Now this title of your book, Wrong Things About Africa, carries quite a heavy weight. Can you tell us the thoughts behind this title?
Yes. Well, as you rightly pointed out, it does carry a heavy weight. It actually, when I was writing this book, sometimes I would, take time and pause and ask myself, should I continue writing this book? But I said to myself, I owe it to my comrades who died while we were fighting to liberate Zambia from a one-party state dictatorship. We were students that called for regime change in 1990. And we were the first students to actually call for regime change in Zambia. Zambia was a dictatorship. We didn't have social media. We didn't have anyone on our side. We only had justice on our side. And so we mobilized the nation and, as they would say, the rest is history. So in writing this book, I also remembered as you rightly, pointed out, that caption, that's Thomas Sankara, who rightly pointed out that if we really want to make fundamental change, especially in Africa, you require a certain amount, a certain madness that will drive you to move away from all those who are clapping for a naked emperor, so to speak, and begin to chart an agenda for your nation, for your people. It's high time in Africa we begin to demand a better life, to demand for quality leadership, to demand for dignity of our people. Now, let's take a look at African countries, for example. Let's take a look at Nigeria. Nigeria is the sixth largest oil-producing country in the world, not in Africa, in the world. And yet you find Nigerians standing, queuing up at petrol stations with jerrycans to buy petrol. Is that normal? Is that colonialism? I say no.
That is one thing that you carry throughout your book. You bring a lot of history into it, and you talk a lot about your experiences and observations with throughout Africa and throughout the African people, a lot of the different viewpoints.
Absolutely.
You bring that into your book. Now, can we still place blame for our underdevelopment from our history? Can we still blame colonialism?
Look, colonialism will always play a part in shaping the material conditions across Africa. Slavery as well will continue playing a part in shaping our destinies, but not from, I would say, a helpless position, but from a position that says, here's a people who have been denigrated for centuries, brutalized and oppressed for centuries, and yet here are a people who continue to drive their agenda in a more dignified way without state assistance. And I'll come to that just in a short while. So the days of blaming colonial rule must be put on the back burner, so to speak. And I'll say it's time we took responsibility in Africa. And the biggest culprits, I'll put it on the table, who are making us live these ridiculous type of existence in Africa, are African leaders.
Now we see a lot. You do have a full chapter in this book where you talk about our African leaders and how we see them every day in the news, how they continue to hold on to power. Now is this the key thing that we need to change on the continent before we move forward?
Absolutely. Africa needs an overhaul of all the leaders that are on the continent. Why? Because politics matter. I mean, politics matters. It matters in the sense that you bring in issues of power, and power determines the redistribution of resources. And so you find that these African leaders use politics to get into power and then create predatory states where they begin to be the chief patrons and, you know, disperse opportunities, life chances, etc., to their cronies. And then the rest of the population are left outside the equation of development. So let us take out the leaders who are, I would say, first and foremost, shameless, moribund, and do not have the passion for their nations. Look, just next door, you have a 92-year-old president, 92 years old, who's clinging on to power, who came into power when I was 12 years old, and I'm told that what is happening in Zimbabwe is normal. No.
Now, what we're seeing now also with a lot of these countries that have these leaders, these, if we can call them dictators, that are holding on to power, a lot of it that's coming out of that is conflict. These people are protesting against their leaders, against elections that we're seeing, unfair elections, a lot of them are claiming so. And so, is this a key aspect that we need to change as well? We also see a lot of aggression coming out of these countries. You talk in your book about this mindset that we carry a lot of aggression throughout our generations. How do we change that from the people that are not in power?
Right, I mean, the basis of any change is people power. We as Africans have given so much power to the big man, the politician, and not being active citizens in our own daily lives. We need to reclaim that power and begin to shape our own activities, our own destinies on a day-to-day basis. But you've rightly, you know, touched on the almost frustration that you get across the continent in terms of the electoral results. Gabon, Zambia just now, and you're asking the questions, why do you find election results coming out not in favor of the supposedly, you know, the people's choice, but again, entrenching the same system? You see, when we were fighting for multi-party democracy in the 1990s, the dictators and autocrats and systems that knew that they didn't want to bring in play the mass of the people in the political process, they were clever. They're very good at reinventing themselves, the dictators and the autocrats. So they knew that the world was frowning on dictatorships, right? And then they reshaped themselves, reinvented themselves into so-called multi-party systems. But you look at why there's so much acrimony is that there hasn't been structural and institutional reforms. So you can have elections, but you don't have a democratic culture. And then you don't have civic education, where you have the mass of the people just voting on primordial ties, for example, or criteria. So if you come from my region, then I'll vote for you, or my tribe, or if you look like me, then if you're not too intellectual, then I won't vote for you because then I need to dance and be with you at that level, then I'll vote for you. So the key issue is that we must have a transition that is backed up by strong institutional reforms that are democratic and espouse democratic values and tenets. And that's the way forward.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. Unfortunately, we have run out of time.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for being with us today.
My pleasure.